Welcome to the Political Trenches Local Government at Work, a special Wednesday edition. We are traveling to our final Western province today, and we are making our way to the Sunshine Coast and talking all things British Columbia. To help us unpack that, we are pleased to be sitting down and chatting with the former mayor of Golden, BC. But before our discussion with the former mayor, Ian and I have some stories that we are going to be diving into. So, Ian, 2 weeks have come and gone, and it seems like it actually has been forever with everything going on globally. How are you?
Yeah, it's 2 weeks you're right. It's been and when we're recording, of course, is the early days of February. So yes, there has been a lot going on that's going to have an impact on local governments in Canada and beyond. So yeah, I'm okay.
Let's jump into our first story, and it comes from CBC British Columbia. Trump got his wall, and this time Canada paid for it. A fence has gone up near the US Canada border, but it's nothing like the wall President Donald Trump once envisioned and made a campaign promise about. The unguarded black chain link fence was erected on January 16th, 2025, on the Canadian side of the border that adjoins a park in Washington state community of Point Roberts. The fence, roughly 30 meters long, is at the end of English Bluff Road within the Vancouver suburb of Delta, British Columbia. But the fence means people in Canada can no longer cross into the US park, nor can they meet for a hug while standing on either side of the border. Delta Mayor George Harvey said neither he nor the rest of council knew about the fence before it went up. Quote, "It looks terrible," he said. Quote, "Having a fence that stands out on its own there, I don't think it's necessary," end quote. While there was previously no fence along this part of the border, there were and still are Border Patrol cameras that monitor the area. Many other parts of the short border are marked by a variety of private property fences or, as the mayor described, low barriers that prevent cars from crossing over the shared beaches do not have fences. The mayor said that technically speaking, people that are not allowed to cross the border at any unofficial crossing, and that if they get picked up by the US border agents having done so, that could mean the loss of privileges of entering into the United States. Ian, with this ongoing trade war Canada has entered into the United States, could this become the reality along what is often described as one of the most undefended borders in the world?
So as you have been introducing the story, I've been chuckling and grinning to myself. It's just silly. No, like it's 30 meters of a 1.5 meter tall chain link fence. So at best, sure, you can't hug across the fence, but at least you walk 15 meters one way or the other. Sure, you can go hug your neighbor that way too. So to me, it fixes a problem that really doesn't exist. It does surprise me a little bit, though, that it was the Canadian side, that is the Delta Public Works Department, that installed the fence. And I just wanted to set a bit of context here, if I could, Chris. Point Roberts, if you haven't been and don't know where it is, it's just a little finger of land that stretches south from the lower mainland, south of Delta, BC, and right into Washington state. And there's no way to get from Point Roberts to the rest of Washington by land without driving through Canada. So the fact this fence is here is just kind of funny to me. And one of the things you introduced as part of the story was around consultation. And to me, if this truly is a border issue, then it's a federal issue rather than a provincial or municipal issue. And I suppose if it has to do with border and the Canadian Border Services Agency, then probably there doesn't need to be consultation. That would kind of have been nice to have a bit of consultation for it, for sure.
What's the municipality's game here? How can they remove the fence if the federal government or CSBA installed the fence? Do the municipalities have any recourse to remove it, or are they stuck with what goes on federally isn't in their purview, so they don't have the ability to remove or even amend this fence?
I did a little bit more research into this actually, because I thought it was a peculiar story. And it was the police had requested it to stop people going into Point Roberts. Maybe that's the story. Who knows? Maybe there's more to it or not. But a 30-meter fence is not going to stop people who have an intent in crossing the border. So this was put up by the Public Works Department of Delta. There is a border commission on which kind of looks after both sides of the border, and anything that occurs within a certain distance of the border is supposed to be run through this commission and then approved. I will suggest that one of the stories I looked at actually out of Point Roberts made a note that the fence was actually removed on January the 30th. So it's no longer there. So this whole story seems to be much ado about nothing. So all's well that ends well, perhaps, if I can use another Shakespeare quote.
No worries. We're going to head to our second story, which comes from Global News journalist Isaac Callan in Saskatchewan. City Council is throwing its support behind a councillor's effort to have the provincial government provide every Saskatchewan municipality with funding to create supportive housing units and emergency shelter spaces. The Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association has its spring convention in April and has asked its members to submit resolutions about issues they want the province, Ottawa, and or other agencies to address. However, whether any resolutions reach the convention floor will still be up to SUMA's Standing Committee on Resolutions. During the January 27th regular council meeting of Moose Jaw, Councillor Chris Warren brought forward a resolution proposing that the province support municipalities with more resources to address housing needs. His resolution explained that the Saskatchewan government announced the provincial approach to homelessness, or PATH program, in October of 2023 and committed $40.2 million in 2023 and 2024. The funding aimed to create 155 new supportive housing spaces and 120 new permanent emergency shelter spaces and enhance community safety and outreach responses, including 30 new emergency shelter spaces for people with complex issues. However, the province gave all funding for these new supportive housing spaces exclusively to the two large urban centers, Regina and Saskatoon. Ian, this story could be transposed into every single province and or territory in this country. Dollars often fall to areas where people are. How can municipalities in more, and I'm going to use this phrase, and I know SUMA is I'm going to get an email from people at SUMA. How can municipalities in more rural settings, but are urban based, advocate for better funding when they are left out in the cold?
Well, first of all, housing, as most local government people will know, is by and large a federal and provincial responsibility. It's not actually got anything to do with local government. However, the issues that are faced are local in nature. So in that way, downloading has to happen here. And this is one of those cases where historically, at least over the last decade or so, and more intensively, the issue of housing, homelessness, houselessness has a transitory nature of some people, has devolved to the point where if the provincial and federal governments aren't actively doing something about it, the municipalities either have to choose also to do nothing about it, or because this occurrence happens in municipalities, they are accepting responsibility for something for which they have no authority and for which they're certainly not getting resources to deal with, which is the kind of crux of this story. And whether it's urban or whether it's rural doesn't really matter. Of course, in this case, the article notes that the money that they're proposing is going to the two largest cities in Saskatchewan. However, what the association has said here, or through the resolution that would go to the association, is that the issue is occurring at hundreds of municipalities across the province. So the fact that people will perhaps migrate or navigate into major centers or regional centers makes sense. So it becomes an issue that primarily is going to, or disproportionately is going to affect the larger communities, but it is something that affects the small communities too. So it is something that the municipalities, if they choose to accept it as a responsibility, is something that they have to deal with without having the money to go with it. And this article notes that that's what the association is really looking for.
I'm going to ask the stupid question now, and I apologize if it comes out of a stupid way, in a stupid way. Does advocacy work actually work anymore? Because
yeah, I think it does.
Okay, but I'm going to counter you on that.
Sure.
This is not new. This has been going on for a few years, and it seems like, and I've been to SUMA, I've been to RMA, I've been to AMM, I've been to all these organizations and their resolutions. What they're talking about today, you could literally transpose those exact same resolutions 4 years ago. So is the province not working with municipalities in today's age, or is the advocacy work that they're trying to do not being heard by the people that it needs to be heard by?
If I use a metaphor, it takes a lot of time for a drop of water to erode a rock. So drip after drip after drip, whether it's coming from Saskatchewan in this case, you made reference to Alberta and Manitoba or anywhere else. I think it certainly is going to take time. But if there is no advocacy about this, if no local governments stand up for themselves or stand up as groups, then certainly nothing will happen. Now, whether it's this topic of homelessness or housing in general, which is certainly something that has a major infrastructure cost, then that's one thing. If it's a social issue where it's just a decision, maybe it's an easier hill to climb for the municipalities and the associations. So this is a tough question, and you're right; it's happening across Canada and beyond as well. So if somebody had a panacea, like a universal solution to this, we probably would have addressed it by now. I often ask municipalities or councils when I work with them, "Are you a developer?" And they go half and half, yes and no. But when they say that, what they mean is we're interested in primarily for development so we can grow our population or we can diversify our economy into commercial and industrial land. They're not talking about erecting houses or multi-unit houses for accommodation for people to live in. But if nobody advocates, then nothing is going to change. So I think it has to be done, and it has shown in the past that there certainly is some efficacy to it, depending on what the issue is. This one, however, I mean, Saskatchewan, I'm not sure if this is done for like a political reason or just for egalitarian reasons, but the pot of money that they're talking about at Suma or in Saskatchewan is not very big. And if they are suggesting that it be split maybe per capita, I don't know, among everybody who lives there and the municipalities that way, that pool of money becomes puddles of money in a lot of the very small communities, which there's really not enough money there to make any impact. So I could really see that there has to be the nature of looking at this regionally or like through regional centers, municipalities working together rather than standing alone on this.
I will give credit to Councillor Warren for this motion because what he is asking for is what the province have been asking the federal government to do for provincial governments. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. See, I can throw an analogy in there,
There you go.
time to time. And our final story is out from CBC Nova Scotia. Cape Breton Regional Municipalities former mayor has had to pay back nearly $17,000 after an investigation found she used the CBRM credit card for personal expenses. In December, the municipality hired Sydney, Nova Scotia lawyer Robert Sampson to look into credit card irregularities attributed to the former mayor, who did not reoffer in October's municipal election. In a report to council following a 3-hour closed-door session Tuesday, Sampson said he and local Grant Thornton accountant John McNeil found roughly $76,000 in unreported expenses going back 18 months. Those included the personal expenses as well as nearly $60,000 in legitimate business costs that were not properly reported. I'm going to ask the very, very, very stupid question here. But why on earth would a mayor, a reeve, a councillor, or any elected official need a town credit card, Ian?
In the small towns and communities, they probably don't. In the bigger ones, I was in Sydney just before Christmas, I guess, November. I was passing through, so I wasn't actually working with this CBRM. But I think there is a legitimate reason for some elected officials to have access to credit if they are expected to host or incur expenses where it's political to political people, where there is nobody there who's an administrative person in nature. However, that said, there needs to be a robust policy framework in place, known and used in order for this to be effective, because it is about money. And when something like this pops up, to me, I mean, this one is a bit of a shocking one. And if you're a casual observer, sometimes it would confirm what people say about politicians in the pejorative sense of the word. So I don't think it works. In this case, so I run a company, I have a company credit card and I have a personal credit card. I know which one to pull out to pay for which expenses. I expect most people who have company credit cards or corporate or municipal credit cards would know something similar. In this case, the mayor said it was because she had taken on some additional administrative duties. What I'm reading into that is she was really busy. And she said that what she did was she was wrong for not reaching out for help. And I certainly agree with her on that part. So I think there is a legitimate time for mayors in this case to have a credit card.
I, I've worked in a municipality. I know that the only people who got a credit card were managers or directors of departments, because they're the ones who can go and purchase something, or if they have to purchase something online, they can do it. But every other recourse, even for the mayor in smaller communities, they have reimbursement forms. So you pay out of pocket, and then you get reimbursed for the receipt. I know that's a logistical nightmare because you have to keep receipts, and how often do we just throw receipts out? But isn't there a better way to be reimbursing people or using the public dime? Because you're right, as casual observers, you might see the 60,000 go, whoa, 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 whoa. But here in Alberta, there was a councillor who was charged for using the town credit card for gas mileage. She was just putting money on gas mileage, and she was just driving back and forth to work or using it for her own personal groceries. This just spells like trouble. Can the municipalities, as you say, and you've already mentioned it, but beforehand, but go into a little bit deeper if you can, there's got to be a better way for this, right? Like, because in the day of social media where everything is exposed, this is just going to be exposed more and more often, is it not?
Potentially. But in this case, and you made a note of it, that the credit card policy for the regional municipality has been changed.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of, in this case anyway, after the horse has left the barn, they're trying to put it back in. And they're trying to keep the barn doors closed for either anybody else or for future mayors, that sort of thing. And if this new policy is well constructed, I suspect it probably is, maybe there are other municipalities that have seen what's going on and can use this type of policy for their own use. So there are policy constraints. We can't really get around personal behavior. As an example, if personal expenses start to go on a credit card, that's probably because sometimes it happens by accident, right? I sometimes pull out the wrong credit card, but I can fix that pretty quickly if I do it. In this case, because it was a problem that seemed to have gone on for a while, it probably wasn't a mistake every time. And who knows what the issues were within that. We are speaking about a mayor. You have mentioned another councillor. If we think about the number of mayors, reeves, wardens, councillors across this country who have credit cards, it's probably in the thousands. We've just talked about two of them. And so I don't think that there's a systemic problem here. I think this might be, we have identified the exception to the rule and we're talking about that, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be paying attention to it. Case like this too, there was an investigation. The CBRM has incurred legal fees associated with that. So it's not only the money that went inappropriately and has been paid back, we should say. It's the legal fees and the cost of the investigation as well that's going to be incurred. And it is also then a case of this becomes money that's not spent somewhere else. If we're spending money on legal fees because we're doing an investigation here, we're not spending money on designing new bylaws and policies or another program at the rink or anything like that. So it's a zero-sum opportunity cost in this case.
Through that. Now our interview with Christina Benty, former mayor of Golden, BC.
This episode in our Cross Canada tour, we're visiting the West Coast in the province of British Columbia, and our guest is Christina Benty. Christina is a recovering politician who still loves local government. She works with leaders and organizations committed to building a culture of excellence and an environment that is kinder, wiser, and more conscious. As a national speaker, facilitator, published author, and performance coach for governing bodies and senior management teams, she uses her lived political experience and her educational background to deliver intellectual content with energy and enthusiasm. Christina is a former mayor of Golden, BC, and currently sits on the board of governors of Royal Roads University. She owns and runs a company called Strategic Leadership Solutions and has an opportunity to work with clients across the country. In addition, she's a conference speaker on a diverse range of topics that includes everything from asset management to leadership. I've had the pleasure of knowing Christina for a few years now, and I always enjoy our conversations. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian. I'm so happy to be here.
Or happy you can join us as well too. So I've got a few questions for you about local government in BC and perhaps a little bit more broadly as well. So just starting off with that, can you tell me a little bit about what you think the rest of Canada might be able to learn from how local government in BC operates?
Well, one of the models I think that really works in BC is our approach to asset management. So right now, the province is using instead of a stick approach, they're using the carrot approach. So local governments are encouraged to develop their asset management plans, and then that impacts their ability to apply for funding. And there's a fair amount of funding available to local governments through flowed through from the province to UBCM that local governments can have access to. So it's a real there's resources available in the asset management in the area of asset management. So I think that that's something that's really positive for in BC.
Because we are kind of looking across the country and people might be wondering what's going on in BC, how do you see the local government sector changing in BC in response to different factors that may be internal and external to it?
Well, so I don't think that this is unique to BC. I mean, so many of my clients are in BC, and so I'm fully aware of kind of what's going on in British Columbia. But I suspect it's just as bad elsewhere. One of the challenges that local governments are really, really facing right now is the social pressures and the social expectations. And as you know, Ian, I would say our property taxes were not built to fund social services, and the significant pressures that local governments are facing to deal with the social challenges in their community. We're looking at drug issues with drugs and mental health and housing and a myriad of social issues that are putting pressure on local governments. And they're putting pressure on local governments to the point where I would say one of my messages is your infrastructure that provides critical services to local governments should not be pushed off to the side while you're dealing with those myriad of social pressures. The social pressures are absolutely horrendous and heartbreaking. However, your job is to provide localized services, and this is one of the biggest challenges I think for British Columbia municipalities facing.
We talk about BC as this kind of homogeneous environment, but I suspect it's not. You've got the Lower Mainland, you've got the interior, we've got the North, we've got the island. I mean, how does that diversity affect how local government is offered in the province?
Um, there's a number of commonalities. The majority, similar to probably many of the provinces, the majority of our communities are small communities. And so they struggle with things like staff retention. They struggle with, even during the election cycle, getting folks that to run that are willing to learn and know how to do the job. So there's some challenges. I would say the urban rural divide can be fairly challenging. Obviously, in BC, if folks are following things that are going on in British Columbia, we've certainly had our fair share of impacts during the like wildfires and flooding, unanticipated impacts on our infrastructure due to climate change. That's been a huge issue for many of our communities. We're talking, even in our community, we were sort of aware of wildfire mitigation. And now, last year we experienced a significant wildfire that had an impact on our community and evacuated certain parts of our community and at some point threatened our entire community. And so these are new new threats and changes, and so the need to adapt and respond is fairly critical right now.
I'd like to switch, if I can, a little bit to about you personally, and just have told us you're a recovering or recovered, I don't know if you ever completely recover politician, but what made you decide to get involved in the town of Golden in the first place?
So I got involved in governance at the town of Golden early, like in my late 20s, because I sat on the local health councils and I sat on the regional health districts, and I remember being somewhat disenchanted with the whole experience of governance, and saw ways that I thought it could be done better. And so, when the Liberal government came in 2001, they canceled all of the local health boards, and so I was gone. And then in 2002, essentially somebody asked. They said, you've been involved in governance. You seem to be curious. You studied politics. Maybe you should consider running for office. And that. To be quite honest, I had very little experience, but I was encouraged to run and get along, or run and get involved, and so decided I wanted to get involved in my community in that capacity. And the learning curve was significant. It was very interesting. And I enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed the camaraderie, and so I did 2 terms on council before I switched gears.
So just as I wrap up my section here, it's kind of got a bit of a two-parter for you, and that was kind of alluded to it already, but what did you enjoy most about being on council, and what made you decide you had enough or you were done?
Yeah. I enjoyed the camaraderie, and I enjoyed the team aspect. I enjoyed the policy development work, which took us time to develop our policy making muscles. I I actually really enjoyed the ceremonial aspects of being an elected official, particularly as mayor. Like, I loved getting invited to events and places, and the opportunity to educate folks, but also to acknowledge the power of community and the power of seeing ourselves as co-creators of the future of our community. So I really, really enjoyed that aspect. And then I left office partly because I I was 48 when I left office, and I finished my master's and my term as mayor at the exact same time. And I was like, if I did another term, we went from 3 years to 4 years. I thought if I did another term, I might start to get really grumpy by year 4. And so it's probably, you need to have an exit plan. And my master's degree was my exit plan. So that's actually why I got out. And I was like, the other thing is I was like, I need to make some money.
Fair enough.
I felt like I was working 24 hours a day as mayor and making 20 grand a year, which is a true story.
We often hear on the show municipalities are creatures of the province. And as I say that, I know I'm probably going to get some nasty emails from some municipal leaders who say they are not. They are an equal level of government to the province and the federal government. But how would you rate the relationship between the municipalities and the province today compared to when you were in office under the Liberal government? I know it's a political question, but we're in the political trenches, so I've got to ask it.
So I'm going to put on my social scientist hat, actually, and and talk about talk about how social systems operate. And when you're at the top of the system, you often make decisions where you're trying to solve problems. And if you don't connect with the bottom of the system, the people that have to implement those changes, and you don't consult with them and engage them and figure out and employ them to solve problems with you, then all you're doing is trying to solve problems at the top of the system and leaving the application of the solution to the bottom of the system. And we see this in organizations all the time. What I've noticed is that the province is facing significant pressures like local government in terms of housing and all the social challenges that they're facing. And some of their solutions, I would say that they haven't really consulted those who have to implement those solutions. I don't think they've done a really good job of consulting, because that doesn't happen in almost any system, where talk to the people that are actually implementing the policies. I found this when I was mayor, where we would make decisions and I would find out later that those who had to actually implement the decisions on the ground, that we put them in a precarious position because we didn't engage them appropriately on what is the best way to do this. So it's more of a systemic challenge than it is like depending on the system. It's just a pattern of behavior in systems.
So do you find that municipalities are turning that perspective of being more reactive to what people are, the challenges that they want, and now being more proactive with telling people what the good, the bad, and the uglies are of the decisions that are going to be made? When you look at and you talk to municipal leaders across BC, what's your sense of their engagement with the residents of the communities? Because we talk about the province dictating what the municipalities do. The municipalities dictate what the residents can do. So do you get a sense that the municipalities understand that they need to bring the residents along for decision making?
I think we could do a lot better in terms of engaging residents and citizens and helping them see themselves as part of the solution instead of part of the problem. A component of my research in asset management showed that the public has no idea the cost to provide services. Some of my survey questions demonstrated that, the public has no idea what it costs to build, one block of sidewalks or one block of road with water and sewer. Like they don't have a concept. And so it's so key for municipalities to engage their citizens and say, here's some of the challenges that we are facing, and here's the ways that you can help us. I'm going to veer off and can I tell a story really quick?
Go right ahead.
So one of my clients, their wastewater system was having a huge impact, that was being impacted by the fact that people were flushing diapers down the toilet, and it was impacting the life cycle of their of this critical piece of infrastructure. And so so one of the strategies was, okay, it's going to have a shorter lifespan. We better prepare to replace it sooner rather than later. And the CAO was telling me, no, let's do an educational campaign and let's tell people that they're actually increasing their tax dollars unwittingly by this behavior. And it was like kids' diapers and adult diapers and such. And so this one campaign in the community, people, when they saw themselves as part of the solution, they stopped. Like there was a massive campaign and they stopped doing that, and it extended the life of their infrastructure right there. So it's things like that are surprisingly connected to citizen engagement and helping citizens see themselves as you're a co-creator of the system. Like every time somebody defaces public property, taxes go up. Because somebody's got to clean it. Somebody's got to fix it. Somebody's got to repaint it or whatever. And so until we see ourselves as collectively as part of the solution, we're not going to make that connection piece.
You talk about the good news stories about these communities that you're working with who are doing proactive measures. How do municipalities do better in 2025 to engage with their residents? Apathy is at an all-time high, and municipalities are trying to do their best. What good news stories are you seeing out there that gives me hope, that can give me hope that municipalities are turning a corner and making things better for their residents?
So there are municipalities, they're actually doing the work of like engaging their residents and not just using using social media as a way to engage the message. But I'm watching communities that are actually doing things like having, coffee with mayor and council. They're inviting informal sessions so that people can come, and particularly in small communities. One of the things I encourage politicians to do is, again, go to the schools, do presentations on how does local government benefit our lives, but also find the different clubs around your community and say, hey, can I have 10 minutes to just talk about what we're up to and what we do? And 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 I think that most people are turned off right now by social media because of all the incivility. But when you're walking into a room and meeting with a group of people and you're looking them in the eye and telling them the truth, you can actually have a positive reverberation through your community, because people will know then that you're accessible. I'll tell you one thing that I did when I was mayor, which I personally thought was kind of cool. So when people would talk smack about the town or about council on social media, and the conversation was misinformed, because we lived in a small town, I'd pick up the phone. I'd say, hey, just want to let you know, it's Mayor Christina Benty. Just want to let you know that I read what you wrote on Facebook, and I don't think you have all the facts. So maybe this would be helpful. And I didn't do it in a defensive way. As a matter of fact, I think local government should be on the offensive rather than the defensive. And what it did is it sent a message to folks. If you're going to talk smack, the mayor's going to call you, number one. And number two, people would apologize. They'd make comment. They'd take their comment off. They became champions. And I saw a narrative shift in our community. And I think that the work I'm doing in the world is I want to be a narrative shifter. Local government has so much to celebrate and provides excellent services. Let's not compromise that. Let's brag and provide those excellent services and then tell people. I think local government has done a lousy job of bragging about what they do, but they make your life better every single day, and you use every service. There's that saying that, if the federal government disappeared, it might take you months to realize. If the provincial government disappeared, it might take you weeks to realize. If local government disappeared, you would know the second you got up to turn on the tap or go to the bathroom. You'd know. And so this absence of bragging and telling the good news story, I think, is harming local governments. Be on the offensive.
Preach it.
Amen. The gospel according to Christina.
Yeah.
So I'd like to say thank you very much, Christina, for joining us, and your knowledge and your wisdom are really valuable. You've talked about being a narrative shifter and an asset management evangelist, and that passion has really come through. So thank you so much for joining us on the Political Trenches today.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. And to those of you who are listening or are watching, our full interview with Christina Benty will be airing next Monday.
Ian, that was a great interview with the former mayor. 3 great stories. We're back in the swing of things. How do you feel like today's episode went?
I've known Christina for a while, so I kind of knew what she was going to talk about. She's the only person I know who the first thing on her agenda is asset management, and she's passionate about it. She calls herself an evangelist, and she proves it. But she's also really knowledgeable about a lot of other things as well. And as you saw in the interview, she's very personable. And I really quite enjoyed talking to her. So I think some of the things she brought up actually blended really well with some of the stories we were talking about right off the top as well. So accidentally, maybe on purpose, there was a theme that kind of ran through today's episode. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Chris.
It's like we prepare for these things. What's going on in the world of Strategic Steps Incorporated these days? Anything new, exciting? Any new events that you're going to be wanting to plug here?
Whoa, well, it's funny you should mention that. Of course, the PMA, the Professional Municipal Administrators of Newfoundland and Labrador, we are hosting a workshop in association with them in St. John's in April around civility and in local government, and we're hopeful that we'll get lots of people out to to see that as part of their pre-conference session work. Other than that, it's the normal work of strategic steps around the country that's happening over the next week or two or months as well.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to sit down with you in the political trenches and talk about local government at work. So until probably 2 weeks' time, we'll be back with another episode where we're heading to Ontario to talk to some mayors about Ontario municipalities, but of course, with everything going on in Ontario, the Ontario provincial election. So you will not want to miss that episode in 2 weeks' time. Ian, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to you later.